in this room can ultimately bring really substantial partnership to the citizens of the region who also deserve more freedom, more democracy, and their own rights at work. And so we're very proud to be able to partner with organizations like this, brave organizations standing up. The international labor movement is very focused on the Gulf region and partners with these trade unions and NGOs working on this in the region as well as in Asia. I'm happy to describe that more if folks are interested in that. But for now, I wanted to ask the panelists to, since the time is short, to just give your top example of one recommendation for the US government. Okay, your top recommendation for the US government, since we're here on Capitol Hill, Congress, or the government, of what we can do to support an end to modern day slavery in the Gulf. Who'd like to start?
I guess twofold. One is obviously to urge Gulf states, but also not just Gulf states, any labor importing country, to abolish the kafala system, to allow workers to come in for jobs through a government-regulated system where the government grants visas and that workers can remain in the country so long as they have a job. And to basically urge Gulf countries to enforce their own laws. You know, it's a wild west where laws are not enforced. Laws are blinked at with massive conflicts of interest between governments who are also employers. And this is what I mean by starting and saying that these are easily solvable problems. The other big way is to urge private companies, because most of the biggest employers, many of the biggest employers in the Gulf are private contractors that are multinationals that operate around the world, to use the same labor standards, for example, construction companies, that they do in Belgium or the US or Germany in the Gulf countries, to impose the same corporate standards, corporate obligations, corporate commitments in the UAE or in Bahrain or in Qatar, as they do provide workers on projects in industrialized countries where labor laws are enforced. The private sector has a very important role to play here, particularly in the absence of effective government enforcement. So if the government's asleep at the wheel or deliberately choosing not to reform these labor laws, then private sector actors can and should step in to fulfill their own human rights obligations to respect worker rights.
You know, it's funny, I actually was going to say exactly the same thing about urging Gulf states to enforce their own legislation. For example, all three countries that are surveyed by the report, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, have some form of law that criminalizes human trafficking and makes it a criminal offense for somebody to traffic humans. In Bahrain, just for example, however, at a period of between 2011 and 2013, I think there were only 9 cases that were actually prosecuted, resulting in something like 2 or 3 convictions. So there needs to be better enforcement there, not just in the labor standards, but also in the courts. Beyond that, I think that the U.S. government needs to urge GCC countries to reconceptualize what they consider human trafficking. I think that right now, at least the 3 countries in the report, tend to think of human trafficking as sex trafficking and only sex trafficking and only a sex trafficking problem. Human trafficking is so much more than just sex trafficking. And that's not to say that sex trafficking isn't a huge issue in these countries. It definitely is. But there's so many more issues of human trafficking beyond sex trafficking in Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia that need to be more comprehensively addressed just in terms of a conceptual definition even before legislation is passed.
Thank you, James.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd say firstly, address the commercial issue. So, I mean, any commercial promotion going on by the US in the Gulf should be fully linked in with human rights concerns. So, you know, any US trade delegation which is going to the Gulf, the companies as part of that delegation need to be fully understand what the risks are, you know, of migrant labor abuse in their operations. And they need to understand their responsibilities under international standards, particularly the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, to monitor and enforce labor rights in their contracting chains with the subcontractors below them. That would be the first thing I would say. I think the second thing is a slightly broader point, which is convey the message to Gulf partners. These are strategic partners, that migrant labour reform is a key policy goal of the US. And at the moment, I don't think that message is there. The Trafficking in Persons report, the Human Rights report, those play very important roles in highlighting issues, but they're annual events. So the conversation needs to go on more broadly than that. And I think this is where Congress can come in. I saw the confirmation hearing of the new US ambassador to Qatar, which I think was a couple of weeks ago. And not only did her testimony not touch on human rights, there were no questions about it either. So I think that shows that if ambassadors and other diplomats and undersecretaries aren't getting pressure from Congress to raise these issues, are they going to do so of their own accord?